Hi everybody, I've got James D. Miller here, who's the author of the book Singularity Rising, which I've read some of last year, which was awesome. And James is also like an associate professor of economics, and has contributed significantly to some of the output of the MIRI organization, which used to be the Singularity Institute. So James actually did a talk at the Singularity Summit, I think in 2009.
Yeah, around then.
Yeah. Which I remember listening to quite a while ago, and it was quite interesting. I think one of the points you brought up was, um, if the future, if there's a possibility that the future will be so fantastic, then why did you risk driving to this conference?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you survive to say 2050, you get to live for 1 million years in utopia, then the overwhelming goal should be living that long. And why take a chance, driving someplace when you could die, miss out on such tremendous greatness in the future.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a particularly provoking point. But I think, like, in order to, I guess, formalize this interview, it'd be nice if you could give a little bit of a background to yourself in your own words.
Sure. Well, I'm an economist. I got a PhD in economics from the University of Chicago, and I started out studying game theory and law and economics.
Mm.
And in grad school, I never even heard of the singularity. Like a lot of transhumanists, I was always interested in science fiction, but I never thought to apply that to my work. And then I just, I think I started reading about that, and I realized, God, intelligence amplification, either through getting smarter people or having really smart machines, it just seems overwhelmingly likely that's going to be the dominant economic force, once you get 20, 30 years out into the future, and virtually no economists are studying it. So I thought this is something I should look into.
It's kind of strange that there isn't a big focus on that sort of thing. You may be aware of Douglas Engelbart's work.
I've heard of him.
Yeah. So, like in a 1962 paper that was in conjunction with, I think, Yale University or whatnot, is yeah. Anyway, augmenting the human intellect. It was like a landmark paper back then, and it was a conceptual framework for, I guess, using computational tools, designing better user interfaces, and such so as to be able to, as the name implies, augment the human intellect. So, I mean, he was sort of very well known now for creating the mouse, one of these,
Right.
Douglas Engelbart's. As you may, did you actually watch? There was a presentation he did in 1968 that was now been dubbed the mother of all demos,
I
right?
don't recall. No,
It's
I don't think I've seen
amazing.
it.
Oh God. Well, the unfortunate thing is Douglas Engelbart, being a pioneer in the computational field, did die this year. So yeah. Anyway, so his approach was to enhance human-computer interfaces. So, well, how do you see intelligence augmentation? What does it mean?
Well, I think there's a lot of different paths to it. And my main thesis is that I don't know how we're going to get it, but there's a lot of ways, and there's tremendous economic and military incentives to do it.
Hmm.
And that, for me, is why I think it's very likely we'll achieve it, conditional on us not destroying ourselves.
Hmm.
So one obvious way is, of course, we create computers that are, have consciousness or are smarter than we are.
Hmm.
And of course, we're slowly getting there.
Mm.
Um, Another approach, and I think this almost has to work, is through genetic engineering or eugenics,
Mm.
where we're pretty close to understanding some of the genes that affect intelligence. And once we do that, we can use existing fertility technologies to increase human intelligence. I mean, we know people like Albert Einstein and John von Neumann, they can exist. There are genes that create them.
Hmm.
It's unlikely that they're the smartest our phenotype, can support, but even if there were, having even 1% of the population at the level of John von Neumann would give us something truly spectacular.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It would be nice if we had like a lot of Einsteins and von Neumanns working on some of the problems today that a lot of us are just really too confused about because we just don't have the horsepower to really deal with it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, who knows what they could do? I mean, they were limited by not having real peers.
Hmm.
So it seems we're very likely. Another approach is just that we figure out ways of increasing the intelligence of existing people through brain training. I'm currently undergoing neurofeedback
Yeah,
to
actually.
increase my intelligence. It's not going to make me a superhuman. I'll never reach Einstein's level of intelligence using these approaches. But if it increases everyone's IQ by a few percentage points, that's a few points. That can mean a lot overall.
Yeah,
And then of
right.
course there are drugs like Adderall, the next generation of Adderall. I mean, it's sad to say, but Alzheimer's disease is so terrible that that's giving incentives for pharmaceutical companies to increase people's to come up with drugs that cause people to have better memories and better intelligence. Because if you can keep someone from forgetting their grandchildren for an extra few months, that's worth billions of dollars.
Absolutely.
And I understand that those drugs, some of them they don't target people with Alzheimer's. They increase everyone's memory.
Yeah, that's it's funny, but the interesting thing is with the disease model that's quite prevalent in sort of making decisions about what drugs can be approved. Also, those drugs happen have the happy side benefit of making people more intelligent in general, not just improving the life of Alzheimer's patients.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
good feedback. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, the weird way drugs are regulated in the US is that it's not okay for a pharmaceutical company to go to the Food and Drug Administration and say, this is a drug designed to increase the intelligence of the average person. But it is okay once they've developed that drug for Alzheimer's disease for you to go to your doctor and for your doctor to prescribe it to you for an off-label benefit.
Hmm.
So that's how a lot of Americans legally take drugs like modafinil.
Hmm.
To
Exactly.
not have to sleep as much.
Yeah, that's true. You can get away with less sleep, and it may
Yeah.
even improve concentration span. There
Yeah, or
is
drugs like Adderall to concentrate better, to
so, but
overcome the monotony of a lot of work.
yeah, yeah, but there's people contend also that some of these drugs somehow reduce our creativity.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to know. I don't find it. I mean, for me, modafinil doesn't do very much for me. I've tried it, and I sort of suffer for the rest of the week after taking it. But Adderall made me feel great. I mean, in a sense, I could do stuff that's like really boring. I mean, like I said, I want to read like these 10 books and take careful notes. And if I'm on Adderall, it becomes much more interesting, and I seem to have better recall.
Hmm. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've never tried that.
I,
So yeah, I guess different people have different reactions to certain drugs, and that's one of the
yeah,
things. I think it's worth trying to experiment, but there are just some people who shouldn't take sort of enhancement drugs. I think because you know, I think on
well,
benefit it's worth trying, but some people, it just doesn't work with some people. It's like
no,
alcohol.
you're right. I mean, well, alcohol. I mean, it does a lot of damage to a lot of people. I mean, you should kind of figure out. I mean, for me, video games are far more addictive than any food-like substance I've ever taken. It's just not even close.
Yeah, right.
So that's what I know I have to. But I mean, there's other people, and maybe they would feel towards a stimulant the way I would feel toward a video game. Like I've never played World of Warcraft. I'm afraid.
Don't. Yeah, me
I don't.
neither. I
I don't
think
know if I
maybe
could
for the
handle it.
same reason, right?
But I don't feel alcohol or monopoly. I don't feel like, oh my god, I have to have it. Where I do feel like it's 3 in the morning. I don't have to get up till 10. I could do another hour of this video game, right? That
Yeah, right. Have you ever heard of the website Widows of Warcraft?
uh, I think I have. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So it's a website about like people's bad experiences with being too addicted or too obsessive with World of Warcraft. And there have been some really interesting stories on there. People losing their jobs, losing their family, and even in some cases, this may not have been World of Warcraft. Probably StarCraft, still same Blizzard
That
gaming.
I've played a lot.
Yeah, 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 yeah. The people didn't eat and just played StarCraft like in Korea for ages and then just died.
I think one model of the future, if we come up with the way technology unfolds, is that we get very productive robots, and it turns out that most people just aren't really able to contribute to the economy.
Yeah.
We could have an economy where a lot of people are just they play video games most of the day, and they like get welfare basically, and for not causing too much trouble, and that actually might not be that bad. I mean, the purpose of work is supposed to be something you do you don't really like, but then you get to consume. And if we can have an economy where people are just doing fun stuff, you get 90%
Absolutely.
of the population play World of Warcraft or the equivalent.
And that was a point I was going to bring up. But at the moment, I just wanted to. There's So with intelligence amplification, you have engaged in quite a bit of neurofeedback. What tools are you
Yes.
using, and how have they helped so far? What have you been able to what have you been able to observe in terms of your own behavior and yeah,
Sure. Well, it's weird. It's helped me relax. I'm the kind of person that I just people would talk about how they like to go to the beach and relax, and that to me just seemed like insane. I couldn't imagine being in that kind of state. And I learned when I did neurofeedback that my brain doesn't produce certain like alpha waves as much as other people's brains do,
mm,
and so it's helped me relax a lot more. I'm trying to stimulate part of the brain that's often associated with language to try to become a better writer. I've just been doing that
right,
recently, so I don't know if that's going to work or not.
ah,
It has given me sort of an overall a sense of a more, I don't know, like I enjoy things more sometimes.
mm-hmm,
The most profound effect though has been when I first started doing something called Neurofield, where they actually put some current in my brain. It felt like this curtain was lifting,
mm,
and suddenly like this fog left. But that was actually temporary. And I'm told with neurofeedback often it's unfortunate, but the most powerful response is right away when your brain first is exposed to it.
right, yeah,
So
okay,
I was hoping, oh, this will be the rest of my life. I'll be much smarter, and it didn't end up lasting.
damn,
But I'm just, I'm hoping to become a little bit smarter, a bit more motivated, more relaxed, and a bit happier.
mm-hmm,
Also, I'm doing this for health reasons in terms of my risks. I subscribe to 23andMe, the genome testing service, and I
mm,
have a slightly higher risk than normal of getting a heart attack.
mm,
And so,
that's not
since the
good.
chance of dying of a heart attack is so high anyway, I got worried about this, and I changed my diet, but I also tried to reduce stress. So I'm hoping this will, make it more likely I'll survive to a singularity or to a longevity escape velocity or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, getting to this stage where we can, where society is a lot more durable, a lot more resilient, at individuals and society, means that there's it just opens up a whole new arena of possibilities. If we're around for long enough, yeah, I seriously do believe that there's a really strong chance that we will be able to do amazing things that we've only really dreamt about in science fiction novels and whatnot. I'd love to see the universe. I'd love to explore. I'd love to see what it looks like at the Planck scale.
Yes,
I want
yes.
to explore dark energy and dark matter, right?
Yeah.
and
I want to understand quantum physics. I don't have the math aptitude to be able to understand it. I'm hoping though at some point I can enhance my brain just to get to the level where, physicists today could understand. If I could get that, I would be utterly thrilled.
Yeah, definitely. There's a guy who does neurofeedback in Sydney. I often forget his name for some reason. Yeah, Alan Neurofeedback. Anyway, so um, I'll look that up if I can in between time. But
Okay.
there's an interesting flip side to augmentation, intelligence augmentation, and that is, well, will everybody have the same access to it? Maybe, maybe not. But will it work the same for everybody?
Yeah.
Will some people be able to reach sort of a really advanced intelligence while other people can't through the use of like certain technologies that some bodies may reject?
No, I mean that's almost certainly going to be the case. I mean, although I think a bigger factor is going to be just desire. I mean,
Hmm.
most, at least Americans, if you ask, would you rather become better looking or smarter, they would take the better looking approach. So there might be technologies with, a lot of work and money, you can become smarter. For most people, they wouldn't even think about doing that. That would be way far down on their list, right after, they would be working on their biceps long before they'd be working on their ability to do math.
Yeah,
So that,
that's
motivation might play a big role.
yeah. The guy I was thinking of was Alan Snyder.
Okay.
And what he was able to do with a helmet was confuse parts of the brain because there's a magnetic coil in the helmet, and if you can stimulate part of the brain, basically it confuses that section of the brain. And from my understanding, what that seems to do is this. sort of central sort of organizing unit in the brain that sort of interleaves between all its sort of modular parts, then doesn't need to interleave between as many, so it can focus on like a more of its horsepower on smaller parts of the brain. The
Mhm.
the net output, or one could say benefit, is it's been shown that after doing these experiments, that is, putting people, like putting this helmet on people, stimulating or confusing part of their brain with this magnetic coil, that people can recognize patterns in much better than they could before, almost like a savant, like an autistic savant, right?
Mhm.
And they've been able to learn things in a much shorter period of time than they have certain types of things. I think it's interesting what's possible with stimulating the brain. We still don't know a whole lot about how the brain really works. Well, we do. We know more and more every year, but I'm looking forward to getting to the stage, and I think in our lifetime we're going to be able to see some rapid, massive advances in how we really understand what's the neuroscience of what's really going on inside our brain.
No, I agree. And if you just think about yourself, I mean, there's times in which, I'm really into learning, and there are other times in which I'm just frustrated and I can't learn anything new. And if I could just sort of figure out how to get my brain, much more often in the state where it's able to learn a lot, I could do a lot more. And I have a feeling that that's true for everybody. I
Yeah,
mean,
well,
we don't even know the level of what kind of foods are, make us more conductive to being able to learn right
mm,
now. It's just
mm.
we have a lot to learn, but there's a huge potential, and it's sad that our education system doesn't seem to care all that much about this.
Yeah, you're right. So the education system is very much based around the traditional model of getting people to learn, often just learn by memory.
Yeah.
Mhm. I see some glimmers of hope. Like there are, like for instance, a lot of the courses online are like rationality training courses, like logic and
Hmm.
reasoning. There's courses that teach us how to use software, which in a way is like some software is very useful to advance our output or like make us more productive, which is in a sense intelligence amplification. Reading and writing and all that does mean that we don't need to remember as much. It's kind of
Right.
like, as Werner Vinge says, we'll be like offloading our intelligence onto the environment, right?
Hmm.
So we don't necessarily need to just upgrade what's inside the head, but also our external devices add to our utility and in a
Yeah.
sense,
Yeah.
our intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we can, yeah, just things like smartphones and having access to the internet all the time
Yeah,
makes it a lot
that's
easier for us to accomplish things.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I agree. Um, so one of the things that Douglas Engelbart was interested in was argument mapping. Have you had much to do with that?
Um, I'm not. No, I don't know about that.
Oh, okay, won't. Well, okay, just briefly because I brought it up. It's often what we do in order to understand an argument, is we sort of run it through our mind in the form of linear prose, and
Hmm.
so we see we see like a paragraph as an argument, but it's hard for us often. It's been shown that it's been hard for us to really objectify what that really means, and people get confused.
Mm.
Evolutionary psychology is well is a field that shows that we're the way that we think is very much dependent on our like ancestral environment.
Oh,
So
oh, right, right.
yeah. So we're not really sort of optimizers in a sense. We're more like just executing adaptations that were evolved in our ancestral environment, such as to improve the likelihood of our genes being passed on. And so that doesn't necessarily translate into like optimization, although it's an interesting approximation for it. But we live in a very different world to our ancestors. But the main point is often the way that we think, we evolve to think, it has got a lot to do with embodiment. And so we visualize things, we see things as objects and relations as well as pros. And having arguments sort of described in such ways can help us understand them sometimes a lot more clearly. But it's cumbersome to use these tools at the moment. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, all right. Well, let me see. So, what are your So tell us about this book you wrote about like a year ago, Singularity
Sure.
Rising.
Yes, the book Singularity Rising.
Hmm.
Well, I look at multiple different ways we might increase human intelligence or get super smart machine intelligence. I do Ray Kurzweil's view that will merge with machines.
Hmm.
I do the Singularity Institute, I guess now Mira's view that will create a computer program that'll be able to augment its own
Yeah,
intelligence.
sure. The intelligence explosion.
Yes, economist Robin Hanson's view
Hmm.
that we'll download our brains to computers,
Hmm.
and then I look at genetic
Hmm.
enhancements for the next generation, and then brain training.
Hmm.
And I go through some of the technology for all of them.
Hmm.
And my point is, look, I don't know which is going to happen, but gosh, there's just tremendous economic gains to this. There's
Hmm.
tremendous military gains to this. There's no one body in the world that can stop it.
Hmm.
Like with eugenics, people say, "Oh, but that's like the Nazis. The American government will never let that happen." Well, fine. The Chinese aren't. They're not concerned about what the Nazis did.
Hmm.
They'll do it.
Hmm.
So or you'll have hedge funds operating somewhere that'll give people smart drugs that are dangerous because it makes them slightly more likely to figure out patterns in financial markets.
Hmm.
So there's so many forces to get this. There's no one technology that has to work. I mean, Moore's law could stop right now, and we'll still probably get eugenics, or maybe there is some reason why we can't go beyond Einstein. Then we still might have brain training. There's so many different approaches. There's such tremendous incentives to develop it that we're likely going to have this. And it might not turn out well. I mean, as we get smarter, we get better at able at destroying ourselves. But this is probably going to, intelligence amplification somehow is going to be probably the determining factor for our civilization. And we should, think about it and try to come up with ways of dealing with it. And at an individual level, it has very profound consequences. We talked about some, but another is just saving for retirement. I mean, if you're say 30, traditional advice is you should be saving for retirement now. That might start when you're 65 to 70. But if you're a transhumanist thinking, wait a minute, in 40 years or so, I expect there to be a singularity or something. Maybe you shouldn't be saving for retirement. I mean, it gets you have to think about what's likely to happen. But there's a lot of scenarios in which money saved now really won't help you in the future, because it'll just be too radical a change. Or we'll all be really rich, so what's the point of saving now if you expect to live in a society that's so fantastically rich that anything you put aside now wouldn't matter? But then you can actually make other arguments where maybe what'll happen is the way the technology will develop, that companies will end up earning really high profit. So you want to save extra amounts so you can invest in like Apple or Google, and then that'll be worth even more. So it gets very complicated to try to figure out what you would do. But I think what's like is it. I think if we end up, I think we might reach a point where it becomes clear that we're going to be able to indefinitely extend human life. I think we'll do things like we'll be able to maybe end aging in mice, and I think then a lot of people are going to start to prioritize surviving. And they're going to think, wait a minute, so if I'm alive in 30 years from now, I get to live thousands of years. I really, really want that to happen. And I think that can profoundly change society. And we might see that in the next decade or two.
That's amazing, and we should then bring up the announcement of Google's anti-aging initiative, which is a long-term one. It's 40 years or something like that. They said it's a moonshot. Larry Page said a lot to the effect that it wasn't just a short-term project for creating some short-term benefit, but there's a lot of money. Google has like $52 billion. What could a company like 50 who has that sort of money do to the problem of aging?
Right. I think this ties into sort of equality, that a lot of people have this fear of the future that it's going to be the rich get all the really nice gadgets and the rest of us get nothing. But this actually shows, I don't think that's going to happen. I think what might be happening is the people who run Google are like, gee, we're really rich, what can I buy? I don't want to die. Well, if you're a tech multi-billionaire, the way not to die is to invest in research that helps cure aging for everybody. And so I think we might have, there's other people like Peter Thiel and Larry Ellison are two other tech billionaires who also are investing in anti-aging. And I don't know how selfish or altruistic they are, but even if they're purely selfish, them deciding I don't want to die is going to help most of the rest of us. Well, with very high probability.
So it's interesting I guess it all depends on how the technologies are deployed and the cost of the technologies. It might be the case that when the technologies for, I guess, increasing health span come out, they're prohibitively expensive for some people, and it might
It,
be.
it'll almost certainly be for some people, but if we go on past it, I mean, most pharmaceuticals are affordable to the average American. So, and generally the prices go down. Now, these technologies are often the difficult part is information, is coming up with what you need to do and making sure it's safe. And so I feeling, initially you might, people get the experimental treatments, maybe you'll have to be fairly rich, but eventually the price will go down and down and down.
Hmm.
And it'll probably go to pennies, a pill or whatever, because that's pharmaceutical products are often there's a large software element to them.
Yes, definitely.
So just as we have, very poor farmers in Bangladesh have cell phones,
Hmm.
I have a feeling, the anti-aging cures, it will be available first to middle-class Americans, but maybe 10 years after that, it will be available to the poor farmers in Bangladesh.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I'm hoping that we enter an age that will, even though it might be expensive at a time for some people, the price of the technology will come down. But that's assuming that we still have the same economic model we do today, and that's been the case for things like mobile phones and other technologies as well. So there's quite a glimmer of hope there. I don't know if we can make a strong argument to say that it'll definitely work out that way.
No,
Um,
we don't know for certain. I mean, there could be some weird ingredients in it that are really expensive and rare, but going on what's happened in the past
hmm.
with pharmaceutical products.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to take a bit of a break,
Oh,
and
sure.
then I'll get back to you, and we'll complete the interview. So this is
Okay.
part one of the interview. Part two is coming very soon.